All right, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Hello from Texas. We are hailing from there. It is extremely hot right now in the 90s. The reason and the purpose for today's presentation is to share information with all of you in terms of what we are doing in the state of Texas and how we are providing support to our families there who are Spanish. To reintroduce myself, my name is Heather Parker. I work as a birth 2-3 outreach specialist, specifically focusing in deaf and hard of hearing children, again, for the state of Texas. With me, I have Juan Bernal, who is my co-presenter. I want to make sure that you can see both of us on the screen, both myself and Juan. And Juan, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Juan Bernal. I am a deaf mentor and have been for quite some time. It's an honor to be here today. As Heather mentioned, it is 97 degrees here in Texas, so it is a hot one.
So between myself and Juan, we have a total of 12 years of experience in the field of deaf mentorship together. Myself before in the state of New Mexico and in Texas, serving as a deaf mentor, where I still serve in that role. During that time, I have noticed specifically in Texas, there was a high need to have support for our Spanish-speaking families, specifically those families who have deaf and hard of hearing children between the ages of 5 down through just born. Historically speaking, the Statewide Outreach Center, which is the SOC, which is legislatively tasked to focus on providing outreach and support to, first and foremost, families, secondly, professionals, and then, of course, children throughout the state of Texas. Now, so that could be the Texas School for the Deaf or any other local municipality. We serve the entire state. The Deaf Mentorship Program specifically was created in 2019, so that program is still relatively new. It began serving 13 families. That was in 2019 when it was founded. And since then, it has grown to serving 93 families in Texas. And that's as of May 15th, 2025, our most recent numbers. That being said, for a long time, often we would have families come to us who were seeking deaf mentor services. However, these were Spanish-speaking families, and unfortunately, at that time, the deaf mentor program that we had did not have the resources to provide somebody to provide qualified and competent services to those families. And we typically referred them to other programs, a program called Family Signers Program. However, that was more focused on the ages 5 and above. So for the last 2 years, we have been working very diligently to find and recruit several individuals. Today's presentation is going to focus on those efforts. However, before we begin, we want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of the need, particularly as it relates to the state of Texas. So we're going to look at demographics to get us started. So this is as of last year. Our Hispanic and Latino population is roughly 40% of Texas's total population, meaning that they are the number one demographic in the state. Now, when you look at that in proportionality for ratios in terms of the numbers of children who are born and then identified as deaf and hard of hearing from hearing families, that is typically 1 to 3 per 1,000 births. That being said, Texas is a very large state geographically and also has one of the largest birth rates, respectively, in the United States. We have approximately 339,000 births, 398,000 births. And of that, again, those who communicate in the Spanish language, 38 to 40%, translates to roughly 136,000 to about 144 births for Spanish-speaking families of students who are born. So of those babies born, now we think about how many are going to be deaf and hard of hearing. If it's 1 to 3 per 1,000, that translates to about roughly 136 to 432 deaf babies that are born in Texas to families whose primary language is Spanish Spanish. So that's a pretty large percentile. Oh,
This is one. People are saying that they can't see the PowerPoint.
bear with me.
And I myself am unable to see it as well.
Let me try resharing.
Sure.
Is this working? Woo, okay, great. All right, everybody hopefully can see that. My apologies for you not being able to see it.
Looks
We're
good now.
going to move on. And again, at the conclusion of the presentation, everybody will get a copy of the slide deck.
Let's go ahead and give folks a moment to read this.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, so the Deaf Mentor Program saw a huge explosion in approximately 2022, 2023, those 2 years respectively. 150% increase in the number of families and the number of mentors. In 2023, we started to explore and we were able to successfully recruit Ron Burnell as well as several other individuals. Now, another reason why it's important to have a deaf mentor who is qualified and competent to serve these Spanish-speaking families is because the JCIH report, okay, the Joint Committee on Infant Hearing, has emphasized, and of course, we all know the importance of families who have babies identified with any type of hearing difference. They need to have access to adults specifically who have a shared experience, a shared hearing difference, a shared background, a shared communication mode, a shared family or cultural background as well. And oftentimes, what we've seen historically is families get access to some of these, but don't get access to the shared cultural background or the shared familial background. So we wanted to provide early intervention services by individuals who were trained and specialized in different types of communication, as well as who represented different backgrounds. That includes LSL, speech, ASL, deaf blind, to provide more access to those qualified specialists. And we've done that, but often we don't see enough of those individuals being qualified in the area of cultural competence, cultural sensitivity, particularly when we're talking about the Spanish-speaking population. So one of the goals was that all children have access to deaf and hard of hearing adults that they can relate to, who look like them, and who also grew up with a similar background, which means the same culture, themselves having come from a Spanish-speaking family, so that child can relate to that individual. And they have that shared understanding and internalization of that language and culture. At the same time, how do I say, those families who are struggling not only with a language barrier, but also those cultural barriers of deaf culture and getting access to that if they are trying to navigate and interact with hearing subject matter experts. Oftentimes, these individuals that they have access to are not from Spanish-speaking families, and they need to be. So that was one of the big reasons for the project. We identified the need, and then we decided to act on it and support them better. So when it comes to the mentors we were recruiting, we provided training and we were looking very specifically for certain things. We wanted somebody who was culturally competent, which essentially translates into them having grown up or having had experience or knowledge and a comfortability in a culture. Also, language proficiency in Spanish. Now, that could mean written Spanish, understanding some spoken Spanish. So having had that experience, that was another question that we asked when we were looking for them. Also having personal experience, having grown up in a Spanish-speaking family, having experienced firsthand Spanish culture, something that they have internalized and then could share and relate to the family through that shared experience and that shared commonality. So you see our timeline. The need was identified in 2023, and we immediately began recruitment and training, which took place in February. Our first mentor started providing services to our Spanish-speaking families a little later on in April, and then the number just grew exponentially. We got far more referrals, far more families signing up as a result of that. 2025, January, we looked for and identified our second and then subsequently our third mentors who were brought on board and trained and started to provide services. They, of course, maxed out their caseload, and following this summer, we found 3 new mentors that will begin providing services in the fall to more Spanish-speaking families. So 2022 to 2023, we had very few families who applied to be involved in the program. In the state of Texas, our Deaf Mentor program, just to provide some background, you have to apply for it. It's voluntary. The families themselves reach out to us. They apply for it. It is not something that all families are given information on automatically. Oftentimes, the early interventionists will share information about us with families. So again, the families themselves fill out the application, meaning there's already a level of buy-in when it comes to the program because they're seeking out. So in 2022, we only had 3 families who applied. Once Juan joined us and started providing services, we saw an uptick in those numbers in terms of families who were registering. In the last 3 weeks alone, I was just sharing with one of my colleagues, in the last 3 weeks alone, the number of emails I have received from Spanish-speaking families in Spanish asking for information about how to participate in our Deaf Mentor program has reached a total of 8. And all of those referrals were through word of mouth, families who are receiving services from one, connecting with another family, sharing the information, and then they reach out to us. Another thing is in the Valley, the word is also spreading. And we are finding out about other families who could potentially benefit from the services. And we do reach out to them as well. So it's really nice to see that connection being built organically through the community. So again, we had served no families in 2022. Again, we referred them to the family signing program at that point. In 2023, we started by serving just one family. 2024, Juan came on board and we started serving 5 families at that point. Our second mentor came on board and that brought us to a total of 12. And we are projecting as of September 1st, we will be serving 24 families.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. And we still have a waiting list of Spanish-speaking for Spanish-speaking families only. Now I'm going to turn things over to Juan, and he's going to explain a little bit about what the program looks like in terms of its structure, its day-to-day, and how they provide service. Please keep in mind that geographically, Texas is a very large state. So unfortunately, 90% of our families have to be interacted with only virtually. We have very few families who we are able to deal with in person or via a hybrid approach, and we are working on that, of course. Okay, Juan, take it away. I'll let him explain a little bit more about the program.
All right. Hello again. This has been an exciting journey, and to see the growth has been amazing. What I've found is there, a lot of mothers that reach out, and, when I ask, or they'll ask me, can the fathers be involved? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Fathers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors, caretakers, anyone can be involved. We are very flexible and we meet the needs of the families. There was one time that I met a family at 10:30 at night. I have to demonstrate that flexibility. I grew up in a hearing family, being the only deaf child. I know what that isolation felt like, and I don't want that for the families that I'm working with. So that flexibility is key so that these families can communicate with their parents. It doesn't matter if it's basic sign language or, if they're advanced. I just want them to be able to communicate with their children. So we do have more and more fathers getting involved. Right now, we're up to 6 total, which is just heartwarming. Sometimes I have a PowerPoint that I use. Sometimes we use an Android phone. Sometimes we use an iPad. And I do English and Spanish both. So here's what that might look like. Show you another slide. And the families feel connected because they see the Spanish and the English simultaneously, and they're learning so much. Let me give you another example here. Let me just find the right slide. I've got lots of slides in this PowerPoint. I'm trying to select the best one to use as an example.
Real quickly, there was a question that popped up in the
Oh,
chat.
sure.
And they're asking, are most of the families receiving services virtually and on Zoom? And yes, unfortunately, because just of the size of our state, it's a 16-hour drive from the top of Texas to the southernmost location, 17-hour drive from El Paso over to
Texarkana.
Texarkana. So when you think about where our families are spread out geographically, we don't have conclaves, whether most of them are in Houston or in the Valley or in Dallas, Fort Worth. They're spread out. Unfortunately, there's no concentrated areas. I would say the majority of our Spanish speaking families in the program are either central Texas or the Dallas Fort Worth area or the Valley. So that's kind of a strip throughout the state if you want to think about it that way. So we are working on finding more mentors who can provide more in-person services. Okay. We all believe strongly, of course, that mentor services should be provided in person when at all possible. But unfortunately, for now, the bulk of our services have to be done virtually through Zoom, team meetings, Google Meets, those three different platforms, depending on what the mentor prefers in terms of which they prefer to use to provide those services. Sorry, Juan, go ahead.
Sure. So I teach ASL and English, and here's an example of what that looks like. So you can see the ASL, and then that helps families to really understand the grammatical structure of ASL. And some families prefer that English structure. I'll teach that as well. I let the families decide. I am familiar with deaf families. Some people question, why are you working with a deaf family? And so it's interesting, this family in particular, the oldest child signs PSE, and then the middle child ASL, and the third child cued speech. I think it's important to let them decide. And, these children, and these are my children specifically, are successful. They've graduated, they've got jobs, they have houses, they have families. And that helps families understand that there are no barriers that cannot be broken down for your deaf children. And that I have seen has also influenced fathers joining the program too. So if the family has a laptop, that's great. If they use a phone, that's a little bit of a struggle just due to the size. So I do typically bring my iPad to share with them. I think we can go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties.
Okay, there were other questions in the chat. Somebody wanted to see your example again. Would you mind pulling up your iPad one more time?
Absolutely. So you can see there's the Spanish, and then there's the Spanish that would be grammatically correct for a deaf family. Okay, so you've got that ASL gloss and the English translation, and the same thing follows in Spanish.
Okay, the next question is, do you provide computers or other technology for our families? So the answer is no. You encourage families to utilize the phone. Most of the families we interact with do have a phone. That's one of the drawbacks. Juan will use his own iPad and so that families, for example, if they don't have an iPad or they don't have a computer, can see that, but that is a drawback. And somebody's mentioning you're lucky if your families have internet access because many of our families do not. And we recognize that when a family applies, one of the requirements in order to receive deaf mentor services is they need to let us know if they do not have high-speed internet, then we will try to provide in-person services in those cases. We do have one in the Valley where we do provide in-person mentorship services for that reason. And another question. Are you following a particular curriculum for ASL to English instruction? So the answer is no. We are using the Sky High Deaf Mentor program as our model. They actually have their own website, so I encourage you to explore that. So we follow Sky High's curriculum, and we utilize the structure that they already have in place. They do have some specific collateral materials for parents that provide sign language instruction. Okay, that's what our deaf mentors use. However, they use it in Spanish, of course. When our families sign up and register for deaf mentor services, if we notice they are Spanish speaking, we will send them a copy of that booklet. It's a sign language dictionary. However, it is the Spanish version. All right, next question. Do you have any websites or resources or books that our Spanish families respond well to? Juan, you want to answer that question?
There really aren't many. Most of the websites and resources are in English. There is one book, but I continue to do research to try to find resources such as what you're asking for.
Okay, another question. What dictionaries? So if you look at Sky High, SKIHI mentorship program at their website, you can actually order the Deaf Mentor curriculum from the website. So if you go there, the last page of that has the Spanish ASL dictionary. So you can order that and provide that to your families. It's already been created. Okay, somebody's asking, do you translate the curriculum into Spanish?
Yes, I do the translations. I do the translations, and then, I kind of have my family double check me, but primarily I do work on the translations individually.
And somebody's asking that we write one. Well, to let you know, we are in conversations. We have talked to Paul Gilman, one of the members of the one of the writers of the curriculum, and that's already been mentioned. And we have folks who are working on providing a translation of that curriculum, that Deaf Mentor curriculum, into Spanish. Now, please remember that the teachers who are doing that instruction typically can read English, and then they sit down with the coaches and give feedback to the families. That being said, the curriculum itself, we don't give to parents. That would be overwhelming. The deaf mentors review the curriculum and then use it when they're interacting with the families and providing feedback and talking to them. So very same concept for the deaf mentorship program that we have with English speaking families. We certainly don't give them the curriculum. We provide the coaching, we provide the instruction with the parents one-on-one using the curriculum as our guide. For example, how to read with your deaf and hard of hearing children. We give them coaching on, training kids to tracking skills, visual tracking skills. All that is part of the curriculum with a heavy focus on early visual communication, EVC. And then from there, we go to ASL, and we have our ASL specialists who provide that. And somebody is asking, are your families informed about la palabra complementen or cued speech for Spanish?
Oh, no, not familiar with that.
All right.
I think we can move to the next slide.
Oh, right. There's another question. Do you work with any Spanish speaking families whose children are deaf-blind, have Usher syndrome?
We do.
Do you work with any families like that?
Right now, we don't have any. We do have a family with a child that has Down syndrome.
Okay. Yeah, our second two deaf mentors who just came on board, they both have families, one of whom is serving a family with a deaf-blind child, and the other has Usher syndrome. They have reached out to an early interventionist who specializes with the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And we've had some consultation meetings with them, which is giving us a better understanding of how to support those families and to provide that instruction and coaching. Remembering that it is our deaf mentor who is working directly with the family. Okay, so we are training them. That consultation is helping to train them to work with those families. Oh, goodness. Next question. Do you also teach other sign languages like LSM to those Spanish speaking families?
Yes, I do have one family, and they thought that the signs were the same across LSM and ASL. And so I was able to give them an example, and I explained to them, it's the same as the spoken languages. Spoken Spanish is not the same as spoken English. So I have been able to offer demonstrations to the families. Sorry, we're having a
Okay.
little bit of technical difficulties.
Yep. And the next part of our presentation is focused heavily on data from our parents' survey. So we want to make sure we're cognizant of time and getting that information to you. We did send a survey to all of our Spanish speaking families. Okay, it was electronic. 11 out of the 12 families responded to the survey, which is a great response rate. We were very happy with that. And we're going to share the data with you next in terms of what we saw. These were the questions that were part of our survey. You can see those here. What do they like most about the program? What do you think has been the most helpful part of the program? The next question was, do you feel your sign language has improved and you can communicate with your child more? Any feedback about the Deaf Mentor program was the next question. And the last one was, what do you wish other families who spoke Spanish knew about the Deaf Mentor program when they have a deaf and hard of hearing child?
So this slide is one of my families. And once we got started, the dad got involved and he didn't miss a session. And he said, I finally feel like I'm not alone. He was just so grateful to learn that there were other families. He was learning ASL. The facial expressions from this family were fantastic. And I talked to them about the accent and the facial expressions and how important that is in a signed language. And the communication between the family and the children is simply beautiful today.
Now, when we sent out the survey, we asked about sign language acquisition. Okay. And we have seen the numbers increase. 15% said that they feel like it's really increased. And then the other was 85%, where they said a great deal. We also asked what they most like, and our most common responses was the amount of support and not feeling alone from other families. Juan helping to connect them, and me sending out information and resources on a monthly basis to all of those families. Last month, for example, I sent out information about bilingual bookshelf from the Laurent Claire Center, which they greatly enjoyed and they were very excited about. Also, they appreciated the flexibility. Our deaf mentors work around the clock. As Juan mentioned, some meet in the evening, some meet early in the morning. We want to accommodate all the family schedules,
Do
absolutely
weekends
weekends.
too.
So it is not a 9 to 5 schedule. In terms of what they found most useful, bear with me, was Juan, for example, interacts in ASL with his families. There's no spoken language, there's no interpreter, which really encourages the families to pick up that language.
And if I may, I'm deaf. They have to work on me and they have to work with me and I don't want to rely on an interpreter. So we begin gesturing and then we develop communication with one another that then they organically transfer to their children.
And also, they appreciated and found very useful the repetition. Sometimes it can take up to 4 weeks on the same lesson before we move on to the next one. So we want to give them the time they need to really acquire the skills. And it is very much paced in terms of what is good for that family. So that's one of the nice things about the Sky High curriculum. It is very structured and everything is chained and scaffolded from one skill to the next.
So I met this mom that just felt absolutely isolated. And this was a referral that had learned that other families were experiencing similar situations as hers. And she was so grateful. She was emotional. And it was just a heartfelt moment that I had with this family and this mother. We can go to the next slide.
Now, one question was in the chat was, are all our families that we interact with hearing or deaf? So these are all hearing families that we work with and provide this deaf mentor program to. Oh, another good question. Juan, this is for you. Are there any strong Spanish influencers on social media, deaf influencers specifically, leaders out there, or someone who these families might be able to follow on social media? Maybe organizations that focus primarily on supporting this type of demographic?
There are a few. If you reach out to me, I can give you a list. But in Chicago, Illinois, they have a very prominent Spanish organization, also in California, New Jersey, and New Mexico. There are a lot of Spanish led organizations. So if you reach out to me, I'll give you the specifics on that. Thank you for the question.
So we did also ask families, remember, what do they wish that other folks were aware of? And this comment really resonated with us. Basically, they want audiologists to provide more information about the different programs that are available, specifically the mentor program. These families get a diagnosis of deaf, and for hearing parents specifically, it can almost feel like the end of the world and they have a lot of questions. But it's actually a new opportunity and a new journey and the potential of a new language that they can become involved in. Okay, so empathy statements. We did ask them, those families who have deaf and hard of hearing children, for an empathy statement. And they encouraged all families to get involved, to bring the family together to learn together. And to not feel depressed and recognize that everybody learns at their own pace.
I worked with this mom who had a child that was deaf and also had Wardenberg's. And, again, they realized that they were not the only family in this situation. And the mother was just absolutely thrilled to know that there was opportunities for her child, and the extended family also started to join in on our sessions. So again, it was really great to see that support.
Mm. Now, for our deaf mentor program, we address 2 languages, of course. Having that flexibility and the fact that it is free, our program is provided at no cost to our families. Okay. So with a bilingual program that is free and flexible, they felt that it was very important that other families know about it and that they start early. That was emphasized. Okay. They found that while not easy, it's a very helpful program.
And the families that I work with, once those dads get involved, this happened just a couple months ago. I saw a dad get emotional and I was like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And he was like, my child can finally communicate with me. because historically the child had been communicating with its mother and siblings. And once the dad got involved, he was so excited that the child came to him. When the child said, Dad, Daddy, he was so emotional. And even though, it started with just basic sign language, it was such a heartfelt moment. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to work with this family and that they've learned to support one another.
All right, some of you have been asking for our contact information in the chat, so here it is for all of you. One thing I just want to emphasize about the Deaf Mentor program. Again, 95% of families who are involved with that program do pursue both English or Spanish as well as ASL. So the English or Spanish, by that we mean amplification, going to speech therapy, going to audiology therapy, things of that nature. So really and truly, they are trying the best of both worlds and trying to provide that for their children. What we're noticing in the last year and a half is the referral age is now getting younger and younger. I just told Juan we have a 3-month-old baby soon that's going to be referred to you. Yep.
So excited.
Yes. So in 2023, our average referral age was between 3 and 4, give or take, for this program. Now we are starting to get those families to participate, and we're getting them services earlier in their child's life. This fall, we're going to push the data assessment collection piece out, which we are very happy and will be more than happy to share you some updates on our language acquisition results next year based on that data. Okay. Juan, I think you have one more comment and we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, so I do use the PowerPoint, but I also use, let me show you. I've got flashcards here that I use with families, and I saw that was a question in the chat. For example, the English and Spanish word, and then the sign is on the reverse side. I try to work with the family and determine what the family's need is. Not all families are the same. So I try to identify the areas for opportunity with each family. Sometimes I'll bring toys and I'll show them toys. Parents want to talk about cultural celebrations. And so we'll talk about cultural celebrations and, we'll do a session on that. I want parents to be satisfied with their communication efforts with their children. So it is not a strict curriculum that I do not stray from. If parents have a need, I certainly adapt to their request, and then we fall back on the curriculum. We do finger spelling, we do signing, we talk about deaf culture, we talk about deaf Spanish culture, storytelling, family concepts. Sometimes we just have conversations, and I just practice active listening. Sometimes that offers an opportunity for some teaching moments in the signs that they're using. So really do demonstrate a lot of flexibility. And you said there were some more questions.
Also, before we get to questions, please, if you could use the QR code, that's how we get feedback on our workshop. The next question is actually a good one. It says, does Birth Through 3 service provide support to teachers of the deaf that speak Spanish? So just to clarify your question, does that mean the early interventionists themselves who speak Spanish? Would you mind clarifying your question, please? And thank you, Eileen Baker. Now, we do have some early interventionists who are assigned to Spanish-speaking families, they themselves being fluent Spanish speakers. We do have some early interventionists who do not speak Spanish, and in those cases, we typically bring in an interpreter. Okay. However, we are separate from the Birth Through 3 early intervention services. Okay. In Texas, we have 41 early children intervention agencies that we work with. So that's quite a lot of moving parts. That's 250 parent advisors, coaches, teachers of the deaf. And I would say a high percentage of them do speak Spanish and work very well with our Spanish speaking families just in the general population. Next question. Is there a program for deaf Spanish mentors in California? I'm not aware of one. I suggest you contact, oh, what is it called? They have an ASL coach, so to speak, under the state of California. I would look up for the ASL coaching services and, oh, DCS. There we go. And see what they
Information
can
I can
find.
share with you as well. I'd be glad to do that. Any final questions?
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon and for your time. We really appreciate it.
It really is such an honor, and thank you so much for inviting us to be here today.
Thank you both.
Oh, I see another question. Any links that can be shared with our Spanish speaking families? ASL at Home, I believe, has a Spanish version. That's something else you can look at.